when it comes to Zebec, could this be good? Now, what do I mean by this? What I mean by this is the aspect of how Zebec is part of the Circle Alliance program. Now, even though nothing I say is financial advice, sometimes people like to go back and forth with me when it comes to this because they like to say, okay, Zebec being part of the Circle Alliance program, it's just cool. It's not really going to matter too much. But here's where I kind of have my perspective and where I actually disagree with that. Because, for instance, if we take a look at the Circle Alliance program, what is it, right? Arguably, the way you take a look at it, it's basically a place where projects can learn, connect, build, and grow with a network of organizations with USDC. Now, people may be thinking, okay, but still, who cares about that? Well, here's the thing. Again, Circle, it's the creator of USDC, the stablecoin. So I think something like this does matter to a certain extent in a very important way, I think, especially when it comes to Zebec. But also on top of that, even back in September, right? Circle, they made a post on X stating how they reached 1,000 Circle Alliance program members. So that's very impressive. Again, it's a very impressive statistic in my opinion. And not to mention, Circle is actually a backer when it comes to Zebec, and they actually supposedly hold a significant amount of ZBCN. So yeah, when I take a look at something like this, I think it could arguably be considered to be a good aspect when it comes to Zebec. But there's actually more, because if we take a look at it, for instance, there's like this section in the Circle, site, and it talks about modern infrastructure for leading innovators. And then below that, it shows something like Stripe, Standard Chartered, it shows Binance, it shows Coinbase, Solana, MoneyGram, Arbitrum, which is an Ethereum layer 2, and many others. So when I take a look at something like that, that's very impressive in my perspective. And just on a side note, right, Solana Ventures actually happens to be one of the backers as well when it comes to Zebec. So yeah, I think that's another interesting thing. But besides that, keep in mind, Circle allegedly has 55 licenses globally. So I think that's a pretty cool number, right? But even besides that as well, what is the benefit of, let's say, being a part of the Circle Alliance program? Like, how does it even, benefit a project, let's say? Now, the way you take a look at it is this. Supposedly, the Circle Alliance program partners, they receive incentives, industry insights, and access to companies who I would say are generally focused on that kind of finance space. So yeah, it's kind of like, I would say, a club. It's like, for instance, I have a friend who lives in Montreal, in Canada, and then he works at an engineering place. So once or twice a month, he meets up with a bunch of people who are working in that tech space, engineering, and then they kind of just collaborate ideas, just hang out and stuff like that. It's just kind of the analogy that I have when it comes to this. In the grand scheme of things, it might not show immediate results, but in the long term, I think it could be very impressive. Like, again, what my friend in Montreal is doing, it's just kind of not really going to just yield anything that special, right? Initially, at least. At least also from what I've heard from him, it doesn't really yielded anything at all. But then at the same time, it's meeting with people who are kind of in the same space, kind of, in the same career path, and just kind of collaborating ideas. So that's just the way I would put an analogy when it comes to this, again, the Circle Alliance program. So yeah, I think it's just kind of pretty interesting seeing that when it comes to Zebec overall. Granted, when it comes to something like Zebec, people like to say, okay, how is this stuff really going to just, I think, push it forward? Well, it's because just imagine if, let's say, these other projects, right, that are part of the Circle Lines program, they see something like Zebec, they see what they're doing, with the cards, let's say, or also, for instance, what they're doing with, payrolls, right? Could they maybe take a look at that? Maybe be interested? Who knows? But it wouldn't surprise me because they're already kind of in that same club anyways, So then when they see something like Zebec, it's a little bit more of an easier transition to kind of maybe take a look at what they're doing and maybe even adopt it, right? Or should I say aspects of Zebec, like maybe the cards or maybe the aspects of payrolls or maybe, just other things that it's focused on. Like, for instance, let's say Zebec is also focused on RWAs or should I say real world assets. So yeah, in the grand scheme of things, I actually think this is a good aspect when it comes to Zebec. Oftentimes people like to tell me, again, like I mentioned earlier on the video, that, oh, this type of stuff, people aren't going to care about it because it's just for kind of like a cool factor type of thing. It's just to make Zebec look cool, but it doesn't really matter. But again, I think it actually has value, even though it may not be kind of instant, right? Because sometimes collaborations and stuff may take quite a while. But at the same time, it's just kind of a, I would say pretty cool thing to see at the end of the day. So when I take a look at Zebec, I am very impressed with what it's done so far. Like, for instance, even if we take a look at the Zebec cards, it is allegedly accepted at over 60 million merchants worldwide. So that's very impressive. And also on top of that, we know that the Zebec cards, they're powered by MasterCard. So yeah, overall, when I take a look at ZBCN, I'm still very impressed. Now, when it comes to 10 cents, it is around a 26x from here. But you know what? I feel like it's holding up pretty good, actually, considering how a lot of projects out there have not been doing the best and have had a pretty significant pullback. And at around a $9.5 billion market cap when it comes to ZBCN, it's just not such a ridiculous amount. I think for, again, something that is part of the Circle Alliance program, having something like Circle hold a significant amount of something like ZBCN, also Solana Ventures being a backer when it comes to Zebec. I think in the grand scheme of things, that may not be such a outlandish figure, considering kind of the caliber of Zebec, and just considering also how it's kind of basically the way I take a look at it, sort of this miniature version of Ripple and Stellar. And if, let's say, XRP or XLM still has a future, I don't get why this wouldn't hypothetically tag along with the ride. It's like, for instance, as long as, there's this narrative, let's say, right, for meme coins, especially when it comes to Dogecoin or Shiba Inu, I think just by kind of being in that same space, like, for instance, in the case of Bonk or something like Pepe or something like that, right, or Floki, I feel like just naturally, because, again, they are kind of in that space and they're pretty famous, I think they're still just going to be around. That's just my perspective. Now, who knows? Only time will tell, but it just gives me that vibe. And ZBCN gives me that vibe as well. It doesn't have that many compelling options beyond this, I think, within this space. Like, for instance, of course, XRP and XLM is number 1 and number 2. But then at the same time, if we take a look at kind of the more direct competition when it comes to ZBCN, it's like something, for instance, in the case of XDC, XCN, something like XPR, and as well as Swiftcoin. However, they're all below $2 billion in market cap, much like ZBCN. So we got to think about this, right? XLM, the market cap is around 10 billion. When it comes to, again, that size right there, it's pretty impressive. And then we take a look at XRP, market cap is well beyond 100 billion. So even the kind of difference between the number 1 and number 2 is already over a 10x, right? But then we take a look at something like, for instance, XDC, which is the most, I think, popular kind of known third option within that space of payments and global trade and finance. The market cap is around $1 billion. So imagine that. XLM's around 10 billion, XDC is around $1 billion, and then XRP is over 100 times more in terms of market cap when compared to the number 3 player within this space. There's still some room there for something like maybe other alternatives to kind of have their time. So yeah, just around that range of around a $9.5 billion market cap, it's just nothing that would necessarily kind of surprise me too much. But only time will tell. Currently, I'm just staying patient. I haven't given up, right? I'm still a dollar cost averaging and holding and just waiting maybe for a time when there's a hypothetical altcoin season. That's all I'm doing. But again, I just wanted to make this video to kind of showcase how when it comes to Circle, again, and we take a look at the aspect of the Circle Alliance program, and also on top of that, how Zebec is a member of the Circle Alliance program. It's something I would consider good in terms of an aspect of the project, but yeah, that's just the way to take a look at it. And feel free to subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I'd greatly appreciate it. I want to say thank you for watching. I also greatly appreciate that. And I hope you all have a nice day. It's Willie the Captain, and I'll catch you all on the next one. I'm out. Peace. Bye.